What if everything we believed about our history was a lie? What if those we thought were long gone were only waiting for the right moment to return? Thousands of years ago, they vanished without a trace, but now, they're back. And they're not alone. Humanity's darkest secret has awakened, and with it, the greatest threat to our survival. In a world on the brink of collapse, humanity faces an unimaginable challenge: the return of an ancient alien empire, thought to have perished eons ago. As strange occurrences begin to unfold, individuals who have lived their whole lives unaware of this hidden past suddenly find themselves at the center of a terrifying conspiracy. The story revolves around a small group of survivors who must fight not only for their own survival but for the future of the entire human race. Revenge and transformation intertwine as they come face to face with an enemy far more powerful than anything they've ever encountered. The emotional journey takes the viewer from shock and despair to hope and determination, showing the lengths humanity will go to reclaim what was lost. Will they fight back, or will they succumb to the forces of an ancient power that has already set its sights on Earth's destruction? With each twist and turn, the stakes get higher. Secrets buried for millennia are unearthed, and alliances are tested. The fate of the world hangs in the balance, and the clock is ticking. What would you do if you were forced to confront your worst fears and your darkest truths? Stay tuned, because what's coming next will change everything. The world is quiet, too quiet. Beneath the twilight sky, the air hangs heavy with an unsettling stillness, as if the very planet itself is holding its breath. The horizon is streaked with the dim glow of a dying sun, casting long shadows over vast, barren landscapes where once there was life. In the distance, ruins of ancient cities rise from the earth like ghosts of a forgotten time, decaying monuments to a past civilization that crumbled without warning. Above, the stars glitter with a cold, indifferent light. The sky is a deep, endless black, save for the occasional flicker of distant spacecraft cutting through the void. Space itself seems to be holding its breath, waiting. The galaxy is vast, but in this corner of the universe, it feels smaller, suffocating, as if something ancient and powerful is watching from the dark corners of the cosmos. The planet below is a shadow of its former self, ravaged by the scars of war, the soil poisoned by centuries of conflict. The air is thin, carrying a faint metallic scent, like the remnants of something long destroyed. The wind whispers through cracked stone and rusted metal, a mournful sound that echoes the forgotten cries of those who once lived here. This world is not just a place, it is a warning. The remnants of a deadly war between civilizations that spanned entire star systems, wars fought for control of resources, for dominance, for survival. And the outcome? A brutal, absolute silence. The enemy, those ancient invaders, were thought to be gone forever, wiped out in the final, devastating clash. But the silence was deceptive. Their return, once thought impossible, is now imminent. The mood is grim, the air thick with the anticipation of a return no one was prepared for. The earth trembles lightly beneath every step, as if sensing the stirrings of something deep within its core. The stars above are not just beautiful, they are a constant reminder that something else is out there, something waiting, watching, ready to reclaim what was once theirs. The tone of this world is not one of hope, but of impending doom. There is no peace here, no promise of safety. Only the tension of a universe on the brink of waking up to a threat long thought defeated. The first crackle of static broke the stillness of the night, a sharp, unnatural sound that sliced through the eerie quiet. A lone satellite, orbiting high above the desolate planet, sent out a pulse, an anomaly in its routine transmission. A glitch. But this was no ordinary malfunction. In the dead silence of space, it reverberated like the first warning of a storm, one that no one was ready for. Back on the planet's surface, the faint hum of machinery in a forgotten outpost suddenly sputtered to life. The lights flickered, casting fleeting shadows against the walls of a research station abandoned long ago, its mission to study the planet's decay never completed. As the power surged, an ancient console in the heart of the station began to beep frantically. It had lain dormant for centuries, but now, it crackled with new energy, its screens glowing with an ominous pattern. Something was coming. In the distance, a series of lights blinked across the sky, too organized, too deliberate to be a natural phenomenon. A fleet of ships, invisible to radar until now, suddenly appeared above the atmosphere, their sleek, otherworldly shapes cutting through the blackness like a shadow from a forgotten nightmare. It was as if they had been waiting, hidden in plain sight, and now the time had come to reveal themselves. On the surface, people stir. A group of survivors, scattered, disconnected, just beginning to piece together what had happened in the wake of the last great war, feel the first tremors. The ground beneath them quakes faintly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make their hearts race with sudden dread. Something is moving beneath the surface, something they cannot yet comprehend. The tension mounts as they scramble to understand the signs, transmissions from long-dormant systems flickering to life, strange lights in the sky, whispers of a forgotten history resurfacing. But the answers come too slowly, lost in static and confusion. What could these new arrivals want? What were they after? The survivors have no way of knowing yet, but the stakes are clear. If this invasion is real, it will mean the end of everything they've fought for. The harsh, brutal reality sets in. They may be facing the return of an ancient enemy whose power once decimated civilizations across the galaxy. And now, they're back. Time is running out. The question is no longer if the enemy will strike, but when, and whether humanity will survive the second coming of their worst nightmare. The sky suddenly erupted with a sound like thunder, a deafening roar that seemed to shake the very atmosphere. It was the first sign of the invasion, loud and unmistakable. The distant fleet of alien ships, which had lingered ominously in orbit for what seemed like days, descended upon the planet in a coordinated strike. The ground trembled violently, sending dust clouds into the air as the first wave of extraterrestrial weapons made contact with the surface. Massive explosions rocked the cities, tearing apart centuries-old structures like paper, their ruins now reduced to rubble. It was a death sentence, delivered without mercy or hesitation. In a small, hidden outpost, one of the few remaining safe zones, chaos erupted. The survivors had been piecing together their fragile existence, scavenging the old world for resources, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But now, everything they had worked for, every hope they clung to, was disintegrating before their eyes. They had never seen the ships, never realized how close the threat had been. The enemy had come out of nowhere. A voice crackled over the emergency comms system. "We need to leave. Now." The message was short, frantic, and filled with panic. The survivors scrambled, gathering whatever they could carry, but it wasn't enough. The ships were already here. The invasion had begun. The first blast from above sent a shockwave through the camp, and the survivors were thrown to the ground, their ears ringing from the explosion. Panic swept through the group like wildfire. The world they once knew was gone. Among the survivors, one individual, the leader of the group, stared at the skies with a mixture of fear and realization. They had known something was coming, but they had never been prepared for this, an attack so swift, so brutal, that survival now seemed impossible. The leader's hands trembled as they looked at the crumbling world around them, torn between two choices: flee, leaving everything behind to seek shelter in the unknown, or fight, to make one last stand against an ancient, powerful force. The choice was clear, but the stakes had never been higher. Humanity's survival hinged on this moment. The urgency was undeniable. The moment of hesitation was over. The fight for the future of the human race had begun, and there was no turning back. The only question now was, could they survive long enough to find out what the invaders truly wanted? The attacks came without warning, relentless and brutal. The first wave of ships unleashed devastating laser strikes that left scorched earth in their wake. The survivors, scattered and shaken, had no choice but to scatter further. What once seemed like an isolated incident had quickly spiraled into full-scale devastation. The ground itself had become a battlefield, where dust and smoke now filled the air, blotting out the sun. The survivors had no time to think. The sounds of crumbling buildings, the thrum of alien weapons, and the desperate cries for help filled the air. Every moment was a gamble, a breath between life and death. People ran for cover, clutching supplies, some with the hope of finding refuge, others simply looking for a place to hide from the incoming storm. The once thriving, bustling outposts were now nothing more than ghost towns, their streets eerily silent as the last of the inhabitants fled for their lives. As the alien ships continued their unrelenting bombardment from above, the survivors regrouped in hidden caves and underground bunkers, each one a fragile sanctuary. But the weight of the situation pressed on them. Time was running out. The tension inside these temporary shelters was suffocating. There were no guarantees of survival. People could hear the faint hum of alien craft overhead, always just out of sight, always looming, like an unseen predator stalking its prey. The emotional toll of the battle had already begun to take its toll. Some of the survivors had lost loved ones in the first wave of attacks. Others were too young to understand the depth of the situation but could sense the fear and tension all around them. Even the most hardened of them, those who had lived through previous wars, felt a sinking realization that this fight might be their last. As they huddled together, exchanging fragments of information and broken plans, an unsettling truth began to settle in: the invaders were more than just conquerors. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, and it was becoming clear that they were not merely here to subdue Earth, they were here to erase it. The survivors began to understand the grim reality of their situation. This wasn't just an invasion. This was the final chapter of human history, and the world they knew was rapidly slipping through their fingers. As the battle raged on, the survivors had to confront not only their physical limitations but also the toll on their spirits. Hope was becoming scarce, and the weight of the unknown future began to bear down on them like a dark cloud. Their unity was their only hope now, but even that seemed fragile in the face of a force that could tear them apart at any moment. The question wasn't just how to survive, it was whether they could survive long enough to uncover the truth about the invaders' true intentions. And if they did, what would they do with that knowledge? Amidst the chaos, as the alien forces tightened their grip on the planet, a sudden shift occurred, an unexpected revelation that altered everything. The survivors, now few in number and scattered across makeshift shelters, had been doing their best to fend off the invaders. But the aliens' weapons were too advanced, their forces too numerous. The survivors were starting to lose hope. Then, during a fleeting moment of clarity, a new signal came through, the first intelligible transmission they'd received in days. The voice on the other end was panicked, distorted, and barely coherent, but the words were undeniable. They were here before. They didn't just leave. They were taken. The message, originating from an underground facility once thought to be a lost research site, revealed a startling truth: the ancient invaders, those believed to have died out millennia ago, hadn't just vanished from the galaxy. They had been part of a much larger, far more devastating event, one that tied humanity's history to theirs in a way no one had expected. The survivors, trying to piece together what this meant, learned of an ancient war that had never been fully documented, a war that had escalated to such proportions that entire civilizations were wiped out, not by natural disaster or rebellion, but by something far more sinister. The invaders had been forced into a dark exile, trapped in a faraway dimension, a prison they had built for themselves to prevent their destruction. They had fought not just to conquer, but to escape their own ruin. And now, they were back. The survivors were left in shock, the weight of this revelation shattering any remaining illusions of what the invasion meant. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for the future of their own species, caught in the crossfire of a cosmic struggle far bigger than themselves. The revelation set off a series of cascading effects. The survivors now understood the true purpose of the alien invasion. This wasn't about domination. This wasn't about conquest. It was about something deeper: survival. The invaders had returned to reclaim what had been stolen from them, and their return was not a simple act of vengeance, it was a desperate, last-ditch effort to secure their own existence. With this new understanding came a terrible realization: the survivors had been wrong about everything. They were not just fighting an external enemy. They were fighting a force of nature, one that would stop at nothing to survive. And now, with no time to waste, they had to make a choice. What would they do with this knowledge? What were they willing to sacrifice to survive the unimaginable? The fight had taken on new dimensions, and there was no turning back. The world trembled as the final assault began. The survivors, now aware of the true nature of the invaders and their dire intentions, had no choice but to make their stand. There would be no more hiding, no more running. The enemy had them cornered, but they had one last chance to turn the tide. The alien ships loomed in the sky, their shadows casting an ominous pall over the battlefield below. The survivors, a handful of brave souls, had managed to rally together in the ruins of a once proud city, the last symbol of humanity's fight. Every resource, every ounce of strength they had left was channeled into a desperate last-ditch effort. A daring plan had been put into motion, one that hinged on a fragile hope. If they could infiltrate the heart of the alien fleet, they might just be able to disrupt their command system and stop the invasion before it consumed the planet entirely. The tension was unbearable as the survivors crept toward their target. The skies above were alive with the roar of alien craft, the hum of energy weapons, and the ever-present sense of doom. But in the depths of their makeshift base, they had discovered something, a weakness, a vulnerability in the alien technology that could tip the balance in their favor. It was a slim chance, but it was all they had. As the survivors approached the heart of the alien fleet, the ground shook with the impact of weapons from above. Explosions tore through the earth, sending plumes of fire and debris into the air. The survivors moved fast, darting between wreckage, avoiding alien patrols, and fighting through waves of adversaries. The noise was deafening, the air thick with the smell of burning metal and scorched earth. Inside the heart of the alien fleet, the leader of the survivors finally came face to face with the enemy's supreme commander. The being that had once been exiled to another dimension now stood before them, its alien form towering and imposing, a creature born of ancient darkness, its eyes filled with an ancient rage. The stakes were unimaginable. One wrong move, one mistake, and the entire resistance would be wiped out. The commander's voice rang out, cold and unyielding, promising the extinction of humanity. Yet, as the survivors fought with every last bit of strength, there was no turning back. Their goal was clear: disable the alien fleet's central control, stop the invasion, or perish. Every decision counted. With a final surge of energy, the leader initiated the plan, sending a signal that would either bring salvation or doom. The air crackled with raw energy as the alien defenses faltered, the fleet's command systems flickering. The survivors' desperate push had reached its peak. The moment of truth had arrived, victory or death was now in their hands. The silence was deafening after the storm. The alien fleet, once a towering, unstoppable force, was now scattered in fragments across the sky, its ships drifting like wreckage. The survivors stood among the ruins, their bodies battered, their spirits worn thin. The final blow had been struck, but the cost had been immense. Cities lay in ruins, landscapes scarred, and the air still thick with the remnants of battle. What had once been a world teeming with life was now an echo of its former self. In the aftermath of the invasion, the survivors, what few remained, gathered in the ruins of the final battleground. The leader, bloodied and exhausted, stood at the edge of the crater that had once been the heart of the alien fleet. Their eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the devastation, the silence, and the newfound reality of what they had accomplished. The victory had come at a tremendous cost, and as the weight of it settled over them, there was no joy, no triumph in their hearts, only a profound sense of loss. "Is it over?" one of the survivors asked, their voice hoarse. There was a sense of disbelief in the air. How could such devastation have led to peace? The leader nodded slowly, their mind racing as they tried to process everything that had happened. The alien fleet had been neutralized, its technology disabled, but the invaders' true purpose had been something far beyond mere conquest. The fight had been not just for Earth's survival, but for the very essence of existence itself, as the invaders sought to reclaim what had been stolen from them millennia ago. The revelation of their true history, of their fall from grace and their desperate return, had shaken the survivors to their core. But despite the victory, a lingering question remained: was it truly over? The alien forces were now gone, but the damage they had inflicted on the world was irreversible. Humanity had lost so much: people, cities, culture, and more. The scars left by the invasion would never fade, and the survivors knew that rebuilding would be a monumental task, one that would take generations. Still, there was a flicker of hope. The survivors had endured the unthinkable and emerged victorious. They had faced down a force beyond their understanding and had shown that, no matter the odds, humanity's spirit could not be broken. As the sun began to set on the devastated world, the leader turned to their companions. "We survived. We rebuild. And with that, the long journey of healing and restoration began, one step at a time, into a future uncertain, but still filled with the potential to rise again. The world was slowly beginning to heal, but the scars of the invasion were etched into every corner of the earth. Cities that had once thrived were now crumbling monuments to a time long gone, while new settlements began to rise from the ashes, cautiously, like fragile saplings. Survivors banded together, forming new communities, determined to rebuild what had been lost. But even in the quiet of the rebirth, something stirred beneath the surface, a whisper of a future yet to be understood. As the leader stood on the edge of a broken city, gazing out over the vast, scarred landscape, a lingering question echoed in their mind: had they truly defeated the invaders, or had they only delayed the inevitable? The alien fleet was gone, but the knowledge of their existence, of their purpose, of their ancient war, was now seared into humanity's collective consciousness. The survivors had won, yes, but the price had been unimaginable. What if, somewhere out there, other factions of the same alien empire were still lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike? A sudden, low hum broke the silence, the faintest tremor in the earth, the kind that shouldn't have been possible after the destruction. It wasn't the aftershocks of battle, nor the sounds of nature reclaiming the land. This was different. The leader paused, scanning the horizon, a sense of unease creeping up their spine. Was it truly over? Or had they only uncovered the tip of an ancient, much darker conflict? And just like that, the peace they had fought so hard for seemed fleeting, like a dream fading in the morning light. The answers were out there, hidden beneath layers of history, just waiting to be uncovered. The survivors had only begun to grasp the full extent of the alien threat. The world, as they knew it, was not the same. There were still so many questions. So many unknowns. But one thing was clear: humanity's fight was far from over. The camera pulls back, revealing a horizon shrouded in mist, the silhouette of the leader standing tall against the unknown. And then, as the hum grows louder, the screen cuts to black. If you're curious to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and stay tuned for more.